We are going to continue to go after the main streets with some of the treatments that you saw, but we're also, it's where you see families riding, it's where you see children riding, and seniors riding. What we really need to do, even though we have all this support, we're still an American city, and the car is still the dominant element in our city. And what we need to do is we need to build constituency. That's what we've been doing for the past 15 years. We have been building constituency, and we're at the point where we can start doing the things that we need to do to build constituency even higher. So for about $250,000 a mile, perhaps less, we can build bike boulevards. We intend to build, relatively quickly, a 100-mile network of bike boulevards that will put one of these family-friendly, low-stress bikeways within about a half mile of 80% of our 580,000 residents. We're going to build more car-free bikeways. We're looking at car-free zones, in fact, in one commercial district. We're going to build bike boulevards and what we call advisory bike lanes. We're going to build more of these buffered bike lanes and wide bike lanes. And we're also building these. This is kind of the gold standard of urban bicycling, a cycle track, where it's wide, completely separated, and it really works pretty seamlessly. We are building one. It's very expensive. And it presents engineering challenges when you adapt it to an American context that we don't have in European cities. And so we're working on it. Our 1.5-mile true cycle track is going to cost us about $5 million. But there's other ways that we can do it, as I showed in that downtown example, where it's not physical construction, it's a reallocation of space. So we're going to keep looking for those opportunities as well. So it's always been about policies, funding, and designs. We are going to strengthen our policies. We are seeking more funding at many levels. We are really looking to improve our design. We're entering into a coalition with other North American cities to develop designs that work a lot better for us than current federal standards. I'm just going to share this one policy framework with you. This is our current policy for bicycling. Make the bicycle an integral part of daily life in Portland. It's the main statement. This is what our new policy is going to be. Create conditions to make bicycling more attractive than driving for trips of 3 miles or less. So this acknowledges that we really need to take on the call in one way or another. We want to make bicycling more attractive than driving for these 5K trips, which is the trip distance which works the best for the bike. More than half of the trips in our city are 3 miles or less. And we think that at that distance, based on the experience of cities around the world, the bike can exceed, the share of bike trips can exceed car trips at that distance, absolutely. So what we ultimately want is average people who are riding their bicycles, not because they're cyclists, but because bicycling is safe and comfortable, and because bicycling is prioritized. So, bicycling is a really good idea. It offers a lot of benefits. And I'm convinced that good ideas rise. Good ideas always rise to the top. Sometimes they get pushed back down. But as long as there are people who are working to help them, to lift them up, as I know all of you are interested in doing, the good ideas will rise. Ultimately, we will all be riding bicycles as our main means of transportation. We will all get there. It's just really a matter of when. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions and have a discussion.
Okay, so we've got a few questions here. I'll start over there.
Yeah, I noticed that looks pretty wintry. I wonder winter, I mean, a big problem in a lot of Canadian cities is the winter. Yeah. In Montreal, they have a wonderful network of bike paths, but I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe many of the bike paths in Montreal are only open from May to November. So, what are winters like in Portland, and how does that affect ridership and infrastructure?
They're generally not like this. A little bit. They're a little bit like us. They're mostly cold and wet. So typical winter day, anywhere from 0 to 5 degrees, and rain. It's going to rain almost every day. So quite a bit mild. I mean generally mild winters. Ridership still drops off by about 50% in the winters. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So ridership drops off about 50% in the winters, but because overall ridership keeps climbing, that 50% drop still leaves you at higher levels than. But so I don't really have to think about conditions like this that much, and so I haven't. I know that in Montreal, like you said, they do a lot of flexible things with bike facilities. And that may be something that you would want to look at here. I've been in Ottawa and Toronto and now here, and I've heard the same thing, because you all have a lot of snow and heavy winters where perhaps you're not going to be riding bikes. Although I know in Boston, where I used to live, at Boston, Massachusetts, they do have very snowy winters. They are developed in Cambridge, Massachusetts, their neighbor. They have done a lot to put bike facilities on the streets. And when they're clear, people ride them. When they're not clear, people don't. So I think the winters are probably still milder. But I think that the solution might be it might be a good thing for your local engineers to think about and see, are there ways to be flexible in the assignment of right-of-way space based on season? That might be a good compromise way to start. Again, it's not something that I've thought about much, but I think that with your ideas, working with traffic engineers, that there's probably a way to resolve that. There always is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did it take incremental steps to get traffic engineers to buy into the whole idea of bicycles? Because it's been my experience thus far that there's a lot of resistance to it, as you mentioned, but what were the steps to get them to, or those groups to buy in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in Portland we were fortunate in that many of our traffic engineers, at least some of our traffic engineers, initially rode bikes, and so they understood bicycling. They didn't all ride bikes, and so having that initial engineer who rode a bike and who could talk to his peers about the issues, I think that was helpful. We also would go out, we would organize staff training runs. So we would go out and we would get our staff to go out and ride bikes. If they weren't accustomed to riding bikes, it wasn't just the engineers, but it included the engineers, the planners, the project managers, so that they could get an experience in the field of what the conditions were like and what it was that they were creating, and what potential problems or difficulties they were ignoring. And so I think that was helpful as well, because they were able to get some first-hand experience rather than just look at it on paper. More recently, a lot of the advances in facility designs that we've introduced recently came about because our head traffic engineer, who is a cyclist and likes bicycling, has been very supportive over the years. A couple of summers ago, or a couple of falls ago, he went on a trip, a city trip, regional trip, to Copenhagen and Amsterdam. And he was able to experience firsthand what the systems were like there. He was able to look at the engineering. He was able to meet with their city officials and their engineers and talk to them and sort of understand what it was that they were doing. But most importantly, I think, was just that he saw. And he came back